for giving me the opportunity to present my paper. My paper is about the fiscal decentralization, natural resources, economic growth for testing of environmental Kuznets curve for the Chinese economy. So here are I have my contents. The first of all, I would like to tell about what is the topic, and then I will try to explain the theoretical foundation, and afterward, what is the objective and how I have a measure the data, and then I will explain what kind of methodology and what are the results, and after that, I will explain the conclusion and the policy implication based on findings. So, first of all, the climate change has become a more major concern in all across the globe because it's also the 13th goal of sustainable development, and it's concerned with the different climate actions, and it's also helpful to determinants of climate change. And various think tanks have put command effort to control the environmental pollution, and it's also the part of the Paris Agreement 2015 to reduce the green gas emission and other gases which are harmful to climate change. And similarly, and environmental consequences of different political and administrative decentralization has evolved a subject of discussion in governmental and academic circles. So that's why the fiscal decentralization is really convenience and important instrument as policy instrument, and which helps to restrict the environmental laws to diminishing the environmental degradation. And similarly, we have the exertion, consumption, and over exploitation of the natural resources due to the high economic pace of industrialization of Chinese economy and economic growth, and it's which has a directly and indirectly influenced the environmental degradation. And then we also interested to find out what kind of the relationship they have, if they have to increase their GDP, if they have to increase their economy, and how would the environment respond. And here we can see the theoretical background. Here we have a two school of thoughts. The first school of thought think that the local government, if we have a fiscal decentralization, it is a well performance, and it's well performed, and then it gives the citizen to public goods, services, and social welfare in a very good way without negative externalities, and it means that and then it leads to the quality environment. But on other hand, the second school of thought explain that the public goods and services and social welfare has been explained, and they all depend upon the political institutions, and which leads to the low performance, and which deviate from the optimal path, that is decrease the citizen welfare maximization, and as a result they have a low environmental quality. Based on these two school of thought, I have to make my objective of study to explore the how the fiscal decentralization and natural resources are going to part in redefining the economic, redefining the EKC environmental Kuznets curve for Chinese economy. And then we have a four variable. The main variable is the environmental quality, which is measured by the carbon emission, and is taken by the full development indicator. And then we have a fiscal decentralization. It will measure from the government expenditure to the total government expenditure for as a percentage. And then we also have a natural resource rent as constant US dollar for the measurement of the natural resources, and economy is computed by the real GDP as constant US dollar. And the GDP square has been included to check the environmental Kuznets curve, and the data is has been used from 19 to 2018 as quarterly. And the methodology, first we have to check the data normality. For this we have applied the Jack-Barrett test stats, and after that, because we are using the time series, and then we have to take on account the unit root, and then we also incorporated the unit root with the structural breaks, and then we have applied for the quantile regression for asymmetric approach for the both short run and long run dynamics, and then we also have applied the wall test to affirm the asymmetry, and then lastly we also have applied the granular causality within the quantile, either in the short run they are causing or not. And if you can see the results they are depicting that the all variable are significant, which is mean that the data normality has been violated, which means that data is not normal. So we are not able to move the normality test. That's why we have to go towards the the quartile regression. And here you can see, first of all, we have applied for the augmented decay fuller test, the traditional unit root test to check the stationarity of the data, and then we have applied the Zevis and Andre, the structural break test for the checking they have a same consent. So in traditional and the advanced with the unit root structural break, they have a both uh, same results, just like they have integrated in the first order integration. And after forming the level of integration, there is no problem of stationarity. Then we move towards the quantile regression. And here you can see the yellow highlighted is the significant results. If you can see the error correction model, which shows that the speed of adjustment of the short track dynamics to the longer dynamics, and we can see from the 0.05, the first quantile to the 8th quantile, all error correction term has been significantly and positively significant. It means that the short run equilibrium is diverging from the long run equilibrium. And similarly, if you can see the beta for the fiscal decentralization, and all the coefficients from the first quantile to last quantile, they are significant and negative. It means that the fiscal decentralization is helping us to decrease environment quality. And then if you can see regarding the natural resources, the natural resources has significant negative, that has positive and significant impact, which means the natural resources rent has increased the environmental quality. And if we can see the GDP and GDP square for the sake of environmental Kuznets curve relationship, then we can see from the third quartile and the fourth quintile, the coefficient is significant and positively, which shows a monotonically increasing relationship. And if we move towards the fifth quintile to ninth quintile, as from the zero point 0.5 to zero point 0.9, the fifth to ninth quintile, it shows that the first coefficient, the impact of the GDP on environmental degradation is positive, and the scale of the GDP is a negative, which shows that U-shaped environmental Kuznets curve. And then we also have the short-run dynamics. If you can see that in the short-run dynamics, the relationship has depending upon the quantile. So based on this results, we have we can, but we are now want to verify either these results have asymmetric or not. For this, we have applied the wall test. For consistency of the parameter, we are interested to check either our parameter our parameter are consistent, are biased, unbiased for across the quantile. And here we can see the wall test shows the fixed effect coefficient, the fiscal decentralization coefficient, and natural resources rent coefficient, GDP and GDP square coefficient, all are significant, which inform that the asymmetric consistency of the parameters, which has been calculated from the quantile regression. And then we also have applied the Granger causality to check the causation among the variable within the quartile. Here we can see the probability value is showing that the carbon emission is causing the fiscal decentralization in all quantile. And similarly, the fiscal decentralization also causing the carbon emission in all quantile, which mean that in a short run, fiscal decentralization and carbon emission has a bidirectional causality. And similarly, we also have the result for carbon emission and natural resources in third and fourth column. But in fifth column, the carbon emission is causing the GDP at the first quintile is affecting, but in the second quintile is a significant 10%, and so on. On other quintile, it's insignificant. And on other hand, the GDP is causing the carbon emission in all quintile, and we can see from the GDP causing the carbon emission in all quintile, which means that GDP has a unidirectional relationship with carbon emission in all quintile. and similarly with the GDP square. And based on all these estimates, we have some conclusion regarding the first policy instrument, that is the fiscal decentralization, is proven to be essential factor to eliminate the harmful impact of carbon emission evident from all quantile. And similarly, the national resources and is increasing the environmental degradation. And lastly, we have affirmed that environmental Kuznets relationship from fifth quintile to ninth quintile, that the data has shows for Chinese economy U-shaped environmental Kuznets curve, which means that with the rapid increase of GDP or economic growth, economy size, increase the carbon emission at certain level, and after the threshold level it will be decline. And based on these conclusion, we have some policy implication, such as the fiscal decentralization in China is helpful to decrease the environmental degradation, and the local government can also start the different programs and policies to combat the carbon emission, because the fiscal decentralization coefficient in our quantile is significantly negative. It means that with the increase of fiscal decentralization and environment carbon emission will be decreased, and we have a better environment quality. The second, we have regarding the reduce the rate of the resource deflation and exploitation. It means that if you are using the more natural resources, and if the more resources, then you have increase the carbon emission. And lastly, with respect to the environmental Kuznets curve, it means that at the beginning, the government can invest and have a rapid economic growth, which increase the carbon emission. And after that, they have to use some energy mix, the taxes to decline the industrial sector to use the clean energy or renewable energy. And based on this, thank you so much for listening. If there are any question, is welcome to ask.
Okay, thank you so much for your